Just as I was about to retrieve my forgotten purse, the restaurant manager grabbed my hand, locked his office door, and whispered with a pale face, "Please, be strong, ma'am. Don't scream or faint after you see this security footage." What my husband did in that video made me drop to my knees, all strength gone from my body. That evening, the atmosphere inside the five-star restaurant, located in the heart of Manhattan's exclusive Upper East Side, felt warm and pleasant. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden light that reflected beautifully on the fine china and sparkling crystal glasses. At one of the round tables, situated in a rather private corner of the dining room, sat 4 people who looked like the happiest family in the world. Crisp laughter could be heard from time to time, breaking the silence of the classical music playing softly in the background. Emily was seated next to her husband, Alex. She wore an elegant designer dress in pastel shades that made her look distinguished yet simple. Her beautiful face radiated happiness, though faint lines of exhaustion were barely visible under her eyes. Tonight was special because they were celebrating their 3rd wedding anniversary. It was also a small celebration of thanks because Emily's health had been gradually improving after she had frequently complained of severe headaches for the past month. Across from them sat Catherine, Alex's mother, and a young woman named Jessica, who had been introduced as Alex's adopted sister from childhood. Catherine smiled broadly as she looked at her daughter-in-law with a gaze that seemed full of affection. The middle-aged woman wore her best skirt suit with rather flashy gold jewelry on her wrists. Jessica, sitting next to Catherine, also appeared cheerful. From time to time, she would pour wine into Emily's glass with a very polite and helpful demeanor. Alex, the handsome and noble-looking husband, never ceased paying attention to Emily. He cut the steak on Emily's plate into small pieces to make it easier for his wife to eat. Every one of Alex's movements denoted a deep affection that would make anyone who saw it envious. Emily felt like the luckiest woman in the world. She had inherited a large corporation from her late father, and now had a husband who was not only devoted but also loved her for who she was, not for her fortune. Alex gently caressed the back of Emily's hand and asked softly if the food was good. Emily nodded enthusiastically with a sweet smile. She said the food was delicious, but what made everything more enjoyable was the presence of her loved ones around her. Catherine chimed in with praise, saying that Emily was a good wife and deserved all this happiness. Jessica also added that she greatly admired the harmony of her adopted brother's home. Time passed without notice, and dinner came to an end. The waiter came to clear the table, and Alex immediately took out his debit card to pay the bill without letting Emily even reach for her wallet. Alex always insisted that as the head of the family, he should bear the cost of dinner. Although everyone knew that Alex's wealth was nothing compared to Emily's immense fortune, that responsible attitude was what made Emily love him even more. Once the payment was complete, the 4 of them walked towards the parking garage. The New York night wind was blowing quite strongly. Alex quickly took off his jacket and placed it over Emily's shoulders so his wife wouldn't get cold. Catherine and Jessica walked ahead of them, arm in arm, laughing softly as they talked about something. Upon reaching the family's black sedan, Alex opened the door for Emily as if she were a princess. The car pulled out of the restaurant's driveway. The atmosphere inside the car remained filled with laughter and jokes. However, about 15 minutes into the drive, just as they were about to get on the FDR drive, Emily was suddenly startled. Her hands fumbled around her sides and the passenger seat. Her face, which had been cheerful before, suddenly turned to panic. She realized that her designer leather purse was not in her lap. The purse contained her cell phone, wallet, and several important identification documents that she always carried with her. Emily told Alex in a worried voice that she had forgotten her purse. Alex immediately and calmly pulled the car over to the shoulder, reassured his wife, and offered to turn the car around. However, Emily glanced at the clock on the dashboard and then turned to the back seat. She saw Catherine already looking sleepy and tired. Emily felt bad about making her mother-in-law spend more time on the road just because of her carelessness. Emily finally decided to return to the restaurant alone using a rideshare app. She asked Alex to continue taking Catherine and Jessica to Catherine's home first, and then either come pick her up or wait for her at their townhouse. Alex initially refused and insisted on accompanying her, but Emily convinced her husband that she would be fine. Emily argued that the restaurant was safe and she just needed a moment to pick up the purse. Finally, with reluctance, Alex agreed, ordered an Uber for Emily, and waited until the car arrived to pick her up. In the car back to the restaurant, Emily reflected. She felt silly for being so careless as to leave her valuables behind, but on the other hand, she smiled to herself, remembering how attentive Alex had been. She was grateful to have a husband who honored his mother so much. Emily imagined their beautiful future. Perhaps they would soon be blessed with a child to complete the happiness of their little family. The car pulled up right in front of the restaurant's lobby. The restaurant's atmosphere was much quieter than before. Some of the lights at the front had already been turned off as closing time was approaching. Emily hurried inside. She hoped her purse was still in its original position and hadn't been moved by the cleaning staff. She walked towards the corner table where they had dined when her feet had just crossed the main doorway. A middle-aged man in an impeccable suit suddenly approached her. That man was Mr. Roberts, the restaurant manager who had greeted them upon their arrival. However, this time Mr. Roberts's expression was very different. There was no friendly smile or warm welcome. His face was tense, pale, and his eyes showed a deep seriousness. Cold sweat was visible on his temples. Mr. Roberts stood directly in front of Emily, blocking her path to the table. Before Emily could ask, Mr. Roberts politely took her arm, but his grip was quite firm, as if holding her to prevent her from running away or fainting. In a low, trembling voice, Mr. Roberts apologized for his discourtesy. However, he emphasized that there was something very urgent that Emily needed to know right now. Emily was confused and tried to pull away, asking where her purse was. Mr. Roberts didn't answer that question directly. Instead, he led Emily towards a door next to the reception desk that said, "Manager's Office." Emily began to feel scared. She thought perhaps a robbery or something else bad had happened. However, Mr. Roberts's sharp gaze convinced her to comply. They entered the small office. The walls were lined with monitors displaying security camera footage from various angles of the restaurant. Mr. Roberts immediately locked the door from the inside. The sound of the key turning made Emily's heart pound. She took a wary step back. She asked with a trembling voice what all this meant and why she had been taken into a locked room. Mr. Roberts took a deep breath, trying to calm himself before speaking. He looked directly into Emily's eyes. He said he had to show her something that the security camera above Emily's table had recorded. Mr. Roberts asked Emily to pray, to be strong, and to promise not to scream or faint after seeing what would be shown on the monitor screen. Mr. Roberts stated that what Emily was about to see would change her entire view of the people she had just had dinner with. With slightly trembling hands, Mr. Roberts pressed a button on his computer keyboard. Emily stood rigidly in front of Mr. Roberts's desk. Her eyes were glued to the largest monitor in the center of the room. The video showed a high-quality recording focused on table number 12, where Emily and her family had dined about 20 minutes ago. In the corner of the screen, a timestamp showed the exact moment before they left the restaurant. Mr. Roberts explained that he was doing a routine review of the cameras when his eyes caught suspicious movements at that table. He asked Emily to pay close attention to the moment she excused herself to go to the restroom to freshen up before heading home. In the recording, Emily's chair was empty. Only Alex, Catherine, and Jessica remained at the table. At first, their interaction seemed normal, but a few seconds after Emily's back disappeared from the camera's view, Alex's demeanor changed drastically. The warm smile that always adorned his face vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. Alex was seen looking left and right to ensure no waiter was watching their table. Emily held her breath as she saw her husband's hand move quickly to grab her purse from the table. Emily's heart felt like it stopped beating. She watched Alex skillfully open the purse, as if he knew the location of every item inside by heart. Alex took out a small white bottle. Emily recognized it. It was the bottle of vitamins and iron supplements she always carried and took routinely every night on her doctor's advice due to her frequent complaints of dizziness. On the monitor screen, Alex opened the lid of the vitamin bottle. Without a hint of hesitation, he emptied the entire contents, the real vitamin capsules, onto a paper napkin he had prepared on his lap. He then crumpled the napkin with the real vitamins and stuffed it into his jacket pocket. Once the bottle was empty, Alex reached into his pants pocket and pulled out a small plastic baggie containing other pills, their shape and color almost identical to Emily's vitamins. With a very quick and practiced motion, Alex poured the strange pills into Emily's vitamin bottle. He closed the bottle again, shook it gently to make it look normal, and put it back in Emily's purse in the exact same position as before. The whole process took less than a minute. Emily covered her mouth with her hand, suppressing the scream that wanted to escape. Tears began to well up in her eyes, but she forced herself to keep watching. The most painful part came next. Emily saw Catherine, the woman she had always considered her own mother, witness Alex's entire act. Instead of forbidding it or being shocked, Catherine covered her mouth as she stifled a laugh. Catherine's body shook with mirth. Then, Catherine made a gesture that made Emily's blood boil. The old woman tilted her head, rolled her eyes back, and moved her hands randomly, mimicking the movements of a mentally disturbed or disoriented person. Catherine pointed towards Emily's empty chair, while continuing to imitate the motions of a mad woman. Jessica, the sweet adopted sister, was seen leaning her face close to Alex's ear. Although no sound could be heard from the security recording, Jessica's lip movements and facial expression showed complete support. Jessica was even seen patting Alex's shoulder proudly, as if praising the success of a great plan. The three of them raised their glasses and had a discreet toast just before Emily reappeared from the direction of the restroom in the video recording. The video ended. The monitor screen went dark. Mr. Roberts' office fell into a terrifying silence. Only the soft hum of the air conditioner and Emily's ragged breathing could be heard. Emily felt her world crumble, her legs grew weak, and she nearly collapsed, if not for her grip on the edge of the sturdy wooden desk in front of her. She felt dizzy, nauseous, and betrayed in the most vile way. The husband, mother-in-law, and sister-in-law she supported and loved turned out to be a pack of wolves in sheep's clothing. Mr. Roberts quickly pulled up a chair and invited Emily to sit. He then took a small bottle from his desk drawer and placed it in front of Emily. It was Emily's original vitamin bottle. Mr. Roberts explained that after Emily's family left, he immediately ordered the cleaning staff to check the trash cans in the men's restroom because he saw Alex had gone there before leaving. They found the crumpled napkin with the real vitamins that Alex had thrown away. Mr. Roberts then spoke in a serious tone. He said he had a background in pharmacy before changing careers to restaurant management. He explained that the pills Alex put in Emily's bottle were not a poison that would kill instantly, but a type of illegal drug belonging to the category of strong psychotropics. That medication has terrible side effects if consumed routinely by a healthy person. The effects include visual and auditory hallucinations, excessive anxiety, paranoia, confusion, and even a loss of touch with reality. Mr. Roberts emphasized that their goal was not to kill Emily, but to make her appear insane. The symptoms of dizziness and headaches Emily had been feeling for the last month were most likely the initial effects of small doses of that drug, perhaps mixed into her food or drink at home. Emily sat in silence, processing all this information. The pieces of strange events over the past few weeks began to fit together in her mind. She often heard whispers at night that she thought were hallucinations. She often felt like there were shadows of people in the corners of the room. She often forgot where she put things. It turned out that all of this was not due to illness, but to chemical manipulation introduced into her body by the person who slept next to her every night. Alex wanted to drive her mad. Emily realized the motive behind it all. If Emily were declared mentally incompetent, medically or legally, then the right to manage all of her company assets and her father's inheritance would fall into the hands of her closest guardian, her own husband. They wanted to get rid of Emily and enjoy her wealth without having to become murderers. The plan was so neat and evil. Suddenly, Emily's cell phone, which she had placed on the table, buzzed loudly. The name My Husband appeared on the screen with a profile picture of a broadly smiling Alex. Emily stared at the phone with a lost look, torn between hatred and disgust. She didn't want to answer. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. She wanted to report this to the police right now. However, Mr. Roberts held back Emily's hand, which was about to decline the call. He shook his head gently. He advised Emily not to be reckless. If Emily confronted them now without proper preparation, they could deny it. They could get rid of the evidence. And Emily, who was under the influence of the drugs if she had already taken them before, would easily be accused of having an episode or being hysterical. Emily's position would be weak in the eyes of the law, without concrete evidence besides this security recording. Mr. Roberts told Emily to answer the phone and act as normal as possible. He asked Emily to begin the best performance of her life. Emily had to pretend she knew nothing. Emily had to make them believe their plan was going smoothly. That way, Emily could gather more evidence and turn the tables when the time was right. Emily took a deep breath, wiped her tears away abruptly, and adjusted her tone so it wouldn't sound hoarse. She pressed the green button on the phone screen and brought it to her ear. Alex's voice came from the other end, full of a false concern that now sounded sickening to Emily's ears. Alex asked if Emily had found her purse and if she needed to be picked up. Emily replied in a voice that she made sound a little weak, but calm. She said the purse had been found, left at the reception desk. She said she was waiting for a car to go home, and told Alex not to worry. Emily hung up the phone quickly before her emotions could explode. She looked at Mr. Roberts and nodded firmly. Mr. Roberts handed the bottle of real vitamins to Emily and told her to keep it safe as comparative evidence. He also reminded Emily to take the bottle that was now in her purse, the one containing the hallucinogenic drugs, but never to actually take them. Emily took her purse, which Mr. Roberts had secured in the bottom drawer of the desk. She clutched the purse tightly, not for fear of losing her things, but as a shield. That night, Emily left Mr. Roberts's office, no longer as a naive and weak wife. She left with the fire of anger burning in her chest, but carefully hidden behind a calm face. The war had begun, and Emily swore she would not let them win. She would return to the house that now felt like a den of snakes, ready to play her part in this deadly play. The Uber carrying Emily pulled up right in front of the gate of the two-story townhouse that had been her home with Alex. The house looked majestic and cozy with a small garden out front, a symbol of success and marital bliss that people saw from the outside. But for Emily, tonight that building no longer felt like a home or a safe haven. The house now seemed like a giant, cold, dark stage, full of traps ready to swallow her whole. Emily paid the driver and stood for a moment in front of the main door, taking a deep breath to calm her still racing heart. She had to go in there, face the people who wanted to destroy her, and pretend she knew nothing. Emily opened the door to the house with her spare key. The atmosphere in the living room seemed quiet. The main lights had been dimmed, leaving a soft, warm glow. Alex appeared from the kitchen with a wide smile on his face, as if no crime had occurred just a few hours ago. The man greeted Emily with a warm hug, a gesture that normally made Emily feel loved but now only sent shivers of disgust down her spine. Alex asked in soft tones if Emily felt calmer now that she had her purse back. Emily forced a slight smile onto her stiff lips. She nodded slowly and said she was just a little tired from the trip back and forth to the restaurant. Alex immediately led Emily to the living room sofa. With practiced ease, he picked up a glass of warm water that was already on the table next to the very vitamin bottle Emily had seen in the security footage. Alex took the bottle, shook one pill out into his palm, and offered it to Emily. The man said Emily should take her vitamins so her head wouldn't hurt tomorrow morning. He reminded Emily in a tone full of affection that her health was his top priority. Emily looked at the small pill in her palm. That tiny object was the weapon her husband was using to snatch away her sanity, piece by piece. With a very quick and careful hand movement, Emily brought the glass to her lips. She put the pill in her mouth but didn't swallow it. She hid the pill under her tongue. Then she drank a lot of water to convince Alex she had swallowed the medication. Alex watched her attentively, making sure his wife really drank the wicked concoction. After seeing the empty glass, Alex smiled with satisfaction and stroked Emily's head, praising his obedient wife. Emily immediately excused herself to go to the master bedroom, using the excuse of wanting to rest soon. Upon reaching the bathroom inside the master bedroom, Emily immediately spit the pill into a tissue and flushed it down the toilet. She splashed her face with cold water, looking at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was pale, but her eyes radiated a strong determination. She could not be weak. Emily left the bathroom and lay down on the bed, pretending to close her eyes. Not long after, Alex entered the room, kissed Emily's forehead briefly, and whispered, "Good night." Alex left the room again, closing the door gently, leaving Emily alone in the darkness. Emily waited about 10 minutes until she was sure Alex wouldn't be back. She slowly got out of bed without making the slightest sound. Her thoughts flew to the strange occurrences she had experienced over the last month. Every night, as she began to fall asleep, she would often hear soft whispers calling her name, sounds of a baby crying, or murmurs from an unclear source. Those sounds were what often made her wake up, drenched in cold sweat and fear, causing Alex and Catherine to insist more and more that she was under a lot of stress or disturbed by supernatural things. Tonight, Emily was determined to find the source of that sound. She turned on her cell phone's flashlight and began to check every corner of the room. She checked under the bed, the closet, even the air vents. Nothing. Her gaze then fell on a large, ornate painting hanging on the wall right across from her bed. The painting was a gift from Catherine 2 months ago. Emily approached the painting. Carefully, she lifted the heavy frame off the wall. Her wild suspicion was correct. Tucked behind the wooden frame, on the back, was a small, square black object with a very faint blinking red indicator light. It was a mini wireless speaker. The object was attached with strong adhesive and hidden very neatly. Emily felt her blood boil. It turned out the ghostly whispers that had tormented her were not a product of her sick mind, but voice recordings played periodically by her own husband through this device. Alex purposely turned this device on during Emily's sleeping hours to disrupt her rest patterns and create the illusion of auditory hallucinations. Emily photographed the device as evidence, then returned the painting to its original position so Alex wouldn't suspect anything. Emily's curiosity was still not satisfied. She heard faint voices from downstairs. Tiptoeing and barefoot, Emily left the bedroom. She went down the stairs very carefully, avoiding the wooden parts that tended to creak. The house was dark, but there was a dim light coming from the family room. The conversation between Alex and Jessica became clearer as Emily got closer. Her heart pounded, afraid of being discovered, but she had to know what they were talking about. Emily hid behind the partition wall between the hallway and the main living area. Through a gap in a decorative cabinet, she could see Alex and Jessica sitting next to each other on the sofa. Their position was very close, much closer than the reasonable boundary between adopted siblings. Jessica's head was resting familiarly on Alex's shoulder, while Alex's hand caressed the woman's hair. That scene made Emily want to vomit. This betrayal turned out to be much deeper and dirtier than she imagined. Not only were they conspiring for her fortune, but they were also having an affair behind Emily's back. Alex was heard laughing softly and saying that Emily had already taken tonight's dose. He said that tomorrow, during the company meeting, the effect of the drug would reach its peak if Emily took the morning dose. Alex said with confidence that Emily would surely humiliate herself in front of the shareholders, making the reason to commit her to a mental health facility even stronger. Jessica chimed in with a sweet tone, asking when they could stop pretending to be adopted siblings. She confessed she was tired of having to pretend to be polite in front of Emily, whom she considered foolish and naive. Jessica said she couldn't wait to become the true lady of the house and send Emily to the asylum on the outskirts of the city. She had even already planned a vacation across Europe using Emily's company money for the next month, as soon as Alex obtained the conservatorship over Emily's assets. Alex calmed Jessica, kissed the top of her head, and promised that everything would be over in less than 24 hours. Alex assured Jessica that Emily had no one else besides them, because Emily's parents had passed away, and Emily trusted them completely. Emily recorded that disgusting conversation using the voice recorder function on her cell phone. Her hands trembled, holding back the overflowing anger. Tears streamed down her cheeks. They were no longer tears of sadness, but tears of pure hatred. She now knew that not a single person in this house was on her side. She was alone in a den of thieves. However, that knowledge gave her a new strength. Emily turned off the recording, then slowly backed away to her room. She got into bed, pulled up the blanket, and stared at the dark ceiling. She would not sleep tonight. She would map out a counterattack plan. Tomorrow morning, the real war would begin. The morning sunlight pierced through the gaps in the bedroom curtains, waking Emily, who hadn't really slept at all. Her eyes felt heavy, but her mind was as sharp as a razor. She heard Alex's voice coming from the bathroom. It was time for Emily to begin her retaliation. Emily moaned softly as she held her head, pretending to have just woken up in a chaotic state. She sat on the edge of the bed, her body deliberately a little unsteady. Her face showed a confused expression and a vacant stare. Alex, seeing Emily wake up, immediately approached with a face full of pretense. He asked in a concerned but fake tone about Emily's condition. Emily answered in a hoarse voice, complaining that her head felt very heavy and she could still hear remnants of last night's whispers. Alex hid his cunning smile and nodded with concern. He said it was probably because Emily was too tired and suggested she rest at home until noon. Alex also reminded Emily not to forget to take the morning medicine he had already prepared on the nightstand. Emily nodded obediently. After Alex made sure Emily took her medicine, of course, with the trick of hiding it under her tongue again, Alex said goodbye to go take Catherine to the market and then run some errands. Alex said he would be back before lunch to prepare for the company meeting that afternoon. Emily felt relieved hearing the sound of Alex's car leaving the house's premises. As soon as the car was out of sight, Emily immediately jumped out of bed. The feigned dizziness vanished instantly. Emily quickly grabbed her cell phone and contacted James, her late father's trusted young lawyer who had helped her manage the company's legal affairs. Emily spoke quickly and firmly, asking James to come to her house right now through the back door so as not to be seen by neighbors or by Jessica, who might still be in her room. Fortunately, Jessica turned out to have left with Alex and Catherine. Perhaps they wanted to celebrate their victory early. The house was empty, giving Emily a golden opportunity. Not even half an hour later, James arrived with a worried face. Emily immediately took James to Alex's private office, which was always locked. Emily knew where Alex hid the spare key to that room inside a flower pot in the corner of the hallway. They managed to get in. The room was messy with work documents. Emily went straight to the small safe in the corner of the room. She remembered seeing Alex press a combination of numbers that was Catherine's birth date. Emily tried it, and a click was heard. The safe door swung open. The contents of the safe made James gasp. Stored there were stacks of documents that were irrefutable proof of Alex's crimes. James found the draft of the conservatorship petition that Alex had prepared. The document stated that Emily was suffering from a severe mental disorder and was not legally fit, so all movable and immovable assets, including voting rights in the company, were to be handed over completely to Alex as her husband. There was also a false statement from a psychiatrist claiming that Emily was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. In addition to the legal documents, Emily found bank records of suspicious bank transactions. James examined the documents carefully. He found evidence of fund transfers for fantastic amounts from the company's account to personal accounts in the names of Catherine and Jessica. The transfer descriptions were falsified as payments to suppliers or fictitious operating expenses. It turned out that all this time Alex had been slowly eroding the company's finances to fund the luxurious lifestyle of his mother and his lover. They bought jewelry, designer bags, and even paid the down payment on a luxury apartment using money that belonged to Emily. However, the most shocking discovery was at the bottom of the pile of papers. Emily found a passport in Jessica's name. When Emily opened it, she was stunned to see that Jessica's last name was not the same as Alex's family name, but another one. In the marital status column, it was clearly written, divorced. And even crazier, Emily found an old photo hidden inside that passport. A photo of a civil wedding between Alex and Jessica dated 5 years ago, long before Alex married Emily. This fact hit Emily hard. Jessica was not an adopted sister, not a distant cousin, and not just a new lover. Jessica was Alex's wife, or ex-wife, from the past, whom they had brought into her home under the guise of family. Alex married Emily solely to steal her fortune, while his true love was still Jessica. Emily felt nauseous, realizing how foolish she had been for 3 years, letting that woman live in her house and serving her like her own sister. James immediately photographed all the documents as evidence and put some crucial original documents into his briefcase. Suddenly, the sound of a car engine entering the yard was heard. Emily and James were startled. Alex was back much sooner than expected. The front door was heard opening, followed by Alex's heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. James's face turned pale. He couldn't leave through the front door without running into Alex. Emily quickly signaled for James to hide inside the large closet in the corner of the office, which was normally used to store Alex's old jackets. James slipped into the closet just seconds before the office doorknob turned. Emily stood rigidly in the middle of the room, trying to neutralize her facial expression. The door opened. Alex stood in the doorway, looking at Emily with suspicion. He asked with a sharp tone why Emily was in his office, and how she had managed to get in if the door was locked. Emily's heart pounded as if it wanted to leap out of her chest. Cold sweat began to drench her back. Emily forced a smile she made look vacant and confused. She answered in a weak voice that she had heard whispering voices telling her to come in here to look for Alex. She said she felt very lonely, and was afraid of being alone in the room. Emily played the role of a wife beginning to lose her mind very convincingly. She approached Alex and hugged her husband's arm, whimpering like a small child asking for protection from the evil voices in her head. The suspicion in Alex's eyes slowly faded, replaced by a hideous satisfaction. He saw Emily, who looked like a mess and was dependent on him, as a sign that the medicine was working very effectively. Alex smirked, stroked Emily's hair, and said there was no one here. He then guided Emily out of the office, unaware that in the closet behind him was a lawyer holding the evidence of his destruction. Alex said gently that Emily should get ready because at noon, Catherine would bring a special meal to make Emily strong for the afternoon meeting. Emily just nodded while inwardly preparing for the next act of this game. The sun was already high, radiating intense heat outside. However, the atmosphere inside Emily's house felt cold and terrifying, as if an invisible storm was swirling in the living room. After James's departure, he managed to slip out the back door with the briefcase full of evidence. Emily sat back down on the living room sofa. She regulated her breathing, trying to calm the storm in her chest that had not yet subsided. She knew the next act of this farce would begin soon, and she could not make the slightest mistake. Her enemies, the people closest to her, she now realized, possessed extraordinary acting skills, so Emily had to be a much better actress than them to win this battle. Exactly at 12 noon, the front gate was heard opening. A taxi pulled up in front of the house, and out came Catherine. The woman got out carrying stacked lunch containers in her right hand and a large purse in her left. Her face was adorned with a wide smile that looked very sincere to anyone who didn't know the rot in her heart. Emily watched her mother-in-law's arrival from behind the window curtain with a cold gaze. She saw Catherine stop for a moment on the porch to greet the stray calico cat that Emily often fed. The cat meowed affectionately and rubbed its body against Catherine's legs. But Catherine just shooed the cat away with a gentle kick to get it out of her way, a look of disgust flashing across her face before she put on a sweet expression again as she grabbed the doorknob. Emily immediately returned to her position on the sofa, hugging a cushion tightly and putting on a listless face with a slightly lost look. The door opened, and Catherine's shrill voice instantly filled the room. She greeted Emily with a term of endearment that made Emily's stomach churn. Catherine approached, placed her things on the table, and sat right next to Emily. She caressed Emily's cheek with her hands that felt rough but warm, asking how her favorite daughter-in-law was today. Emily replied in a weak voice, saying her head still felt heavy and her world seemed to be spinning, exactly as the script desired by her husband's family. Catherine nodded with concern, saying it was normal for Emily to feel that way because she was sick. Then she opened the lunch containers. The fragrant aroma of a rich and spicy beef stew instantly filled the room. It was a dish Emily loved. Previously, Emily would have been thrilled if Catherine had brought her this stew, thinking it was a form of a mother-in-law's affection, but today, that aroma smelled like death. Emily knew very well that this lunch was a crucial part of Alex and his family's plan. The shareholder meeting was to be held that afternoon, and they needed Emily in a chaotic, hallucinating, or at least unconscious state so Alex could take control of the meeting under the excuse of his wife's mental health. Catherine skillfully took a plate from the kitchen and served rice and the still warm stew. The gravy was thick, the meat looked tender. However, Emily was sure that hidden within that delicious gravy was a dose of a forbidden drug, much higher than the one in last night's pill. Catherine offered the plate to Emily, coaxing her to eat and have energy. She said she had cooked this specially since early morning just for Emily, so Emily's mind could be calmer and she wouldn't hear strange voices anymore. Those sweet words sounded like deadly snake venom. Emily looked at the plate doubtfully. She had to find a way to get rid of that food without being discovered. She couldn't refuse outright, because Catherine would surely force her. She might even feed her by force under the guise of caring for her. Emily thought quickly, then clutched her stomach and winced in pain. She told Catherine she felt nauseous if she had to eat in this stuffy living room. She asked for permission to eat on the back patio, to get some fresh air so she wouldn't throw up. Catherine seemed to think for a moment, looking at Emily with a questioning gaze, but finally nodded. Catherine even offered to get cold water from the kitchen. Emily did not waste that golden opportunity. As soon as Catherine's back disappeared behind the kitchen wall, Emily rushed to the glass door that connected the living room to the back patio. There, the calico cat that Catherine had kicked away earlier was sitting, waiting for scraps. With trembling hands but swift movements, Emily emptied the entire contents of the stew plate into the cat's food bowl in a corner of the patio. The hungry cat devoured the stew greedily. Emily scraped her plate clean, leaving only a little gravy stain on the edges to give the impression that she had eaten it with gusto. Emily then sat down in the wicker chair on the patio, regulated her breathing, and put on a full-looking face. A few moments later, Catherine arrived with a glass of cold water. She smiled broadly when she saw Emily's empty plate. The old woman's face radiated a satisfaction she couldn't hide. She praised Emily for eating heartily and said that the medicine in that stew would surely work soon to cure Emily. Emily just smiled faintly. Inwardly, she confirmed her mother-in-law's words. The medicine would work, yes, but not on her. 15 minutes passed. Emily and Catherine were still sitting and chatting on the patio. Catherine started asking about the safe in Alex's office, trying to pry information out of Emily. Did Emily know the combination? Emily pretended to be forgetful and dazed. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a horrifying noise. The calico cat that had eaten the stew suddenly leaped high into the air, as if something had stung it. The cat landed badly, then started running aimlessly, crashing into the wall, flower pots, and chair legs with force. The cat's meow turned into a long, heart-wrenching scream. It sounded as if it was in extreme pain or fear. The cat's eyes were wide and wild. Its pupils dilated until they almost covered the entire eyeball. The poor animal spun around, chasing its own tail at high speed. Then it fell, rolling and convulsing on the patio floor. White foam frothed from its mouth. The scene was so horrific and shocking. Catherine screamed in fear and jumped onto her chair. Her face was ashen. Her eyes stared fixedly at the dying cat. Catherine's body trembled violently, not just from shock, but because she knew exactly the cause. She knew that the horrible reaction the cat was experiencing should have happened to Emily. The dose she had mixed into the stew turned out to be too strong even for a human, let alone a small animal. Fear began to creep into Catherine's heart. What if Emily had eaten it and died right there? Their plan would fall apart, and they could be charged with murder. Emily, who was still sitting calmly in her chair, looked at Catherine with a face of feigned innocence. She asked in a confused tone why the cat was acting strangely, as if it were possessed. Emily even approached the cat, which was now starting to weaken and only twitching slightly, and said that maybe the cat had eaten something poisonous outside. Emily's words struck Catherine's heart. The old woman hastily got down from the chair and pulled Emily's hand away. She said the cat probably had rabies and they should go inside immediately. Inside the house, Catherine seemed restless. She kept looking at the wall clock and occasionally glanced at Emily suspiciously, waiting for the drug's reaction that she believed had already entered Emily's body. However, Emily still seemed normal, just pretending to be sleepy and weak, not convulsing or going mad like the cat. This confused Catherine, but she didn't dare to ask. Perhaps the effect is different in humans, she thought to calm herself. Shortly after, Alex arrived home with Jessica. Alex walked in with a confident stride and face, wearing an expensive suit he had bought with Emily's credit card. He directly asked his mother with his eyes. Catherine nodded slightly, giving the signal that the lunch mission had been accomplished. Alex smiled with satisfaction, approached Emily, stroked her head, and said it was time to get ready to go to the office. Alex said Emily had to attend this important meeting as a formality, and that Emily shouldn't worry because he would handle everything if Emily didn't feel up to speaking. Emily obeyed without saying much. She let Jessica help her choose clothes. Jessica chose slightly drab-colored clothes and deliberately arranged her hair messily to make Emily look even more neglected in front of the investors. Emily looked at her reflection in the mirror as Jessica fixed her up with a mocking smile. In the mirror, Emily saw the gaze of a warrior ready to draw her sword. She let them dress her up like a broken doll, because the more broken she appeared now, the more dramatic her resurgence would be later. As Alex took her arm to leave for the car, Emily glanced towards the back patio. The poor cat was no longer moving, becoming an innocent victim of her husband's family's cruelty. Emily promised in her heart that the cat's suffering would be paid for in full today. The journey to the skyscraper office building owned by Emily's family felt very long and tense. Inside the luxury car driven by the private chauffeur, the silence was heavy. Alex sat next to Emily, holding his wife's hand tightly, as if he were the most protective husband in the world. However, Emily could feel the coldness of Alex's palm and the fine sweat that dampened the man's hand. Alex was nervous, but also very excited. In the front seat sat Jessica, who occasionally glanced in the central rearview mirror, exchanging meaningful looks with Alex. Catherine did not go because she was still in shock from the cat incident and preferred to wait for news of victory at home. The car stopped at the main lobby of the skyscraper in the city's financial district. Emily got out of the car, deliberately dragging her feet, leaning completely on Alex's arm. The employees and security personnel who greeted them looked at Emily with mixed feelings. There was pity and also discomfort. Rumors about Emily's mental health state had apparently already been subtly spread by Alex and his accomplices over the past few weeks. They saw their boss, who used to be elegant and firm, now looking like a lost person with a vacant stare and slightly disheveled clothes. This further convinced everyone that Emily was indeed no longer capable of running the company. Alex led Emily towards the exclusive executive elevator. Inside the ascending metal box, Alex whispered in Emily's ear. He told her to be calm and that she didn't need to say anything at the meeting. Alex instructed Emily to just sit and nod if asked. Alex also informed her that a private doctor was waiting in the boardroom, ready to give her additional vitamins by injection if Emily suddenly felt dizzy. Emily knew very well what those additional vitamins meant. A high-dose sedative injection that would make her pass out instantly if she started to act outside of Alex's script. The elevator doors opened on the top floor. They walked down the thick, carpeted hallway towards the main boardroom. In front of the solid, double wooden doors stood a man in a white coat, introduced by Alex as Dr. Miller. The man carried a medical bag and looked at Emily with an appraising gaze, like a butcher sizing up cattle. Dr. Miller nodded at Alex, signaling that he was ready with his equipment. Emily just lowered her head, hiding the gleam of anger in her eyes. The boardroom doors opened. The cold air from the air conditioning and the aroma of expensive coffee greeted them immediately. Around the immense oval table sat a dozen important people. They were the shareholders, the board of directors, and division heads. Their faces looked serious and tense. Silence fell instantly as Emily and Alex entered. All eyes were on Emily. There were looks of concern and others of disdain. Alex, with full confidence, guided Emily to sit in the president's chair at the head of the table. Then he himself sat in the chair to her right, the position normally occupied by the vice president. Dr. Miller sat in an additional chair in a corner of the room, on alert. Alex opened the meeting with his baritone voice that sounded authoritative and full of empathy. He began by thanking the shareholders for their presence. Then, with a feigned, sad face, he began to recount Emily's health condition. Alex said that with a heavy heart, he had to report that his wife, Mrs. Emily, was experiencing severe mental health disorders lately. He mentioned complicated medical terms, fabricating stories about hallucinations, paranoia, and emotional instability that endangered the company if leadership remained in Emily's hands. The meeting attendees began to whisper. Some nodded, as if confirming the rumors they had heard. Alex continued his speech, saying that to save the company from destruction due to irrational decisions, he, as the legal husband and closest guardian, was offering to temporarily take over all of Emily's authority and voting rights through the legal mechanism of a conservatorship. Jessica, who was sitting in the secretary's row, quickly distributed copies of fake medical documents and the draft of the power of attorney that was to be signed by the board as approval. Alex then turned to Emily, looking at her with an intimidating gaze, camouflaged by a gentle smile. He asked the room if anyone had objections or if they wanted to hear a few words from Emily, though Alex doubted she could speak coherently. One of the older board members, loyal to Emily's father, raised his hand, requesting that Emily speak. Alex looked a little tense. His hand signaled to Dr. Miller in the corner to get ready. Alex brought the microphone to Emily's mouth and whispered softly, "Say you agree, honey, or the doctor will give you the shot right now." It was then that Emily lifted her face. Her gaze, which had been vacant, suddenly became sharp, clear, and full of authority. She straightened her back, which had been slouched all this time, casting off the sick persona she was playing. She pushed away Alex's hand holding the microphone and took control of it firmly. This drastic change made Alex jump in surprise. Dr. Miller, who was about to stand up, froze at Emily's piercing gaze. Emily opened her mouth, and her voice sounded strong, firm, and very sane. There was no tremor of fear or confusion at all. She greeted everyone present with a polite but dignified salutation. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your concern about my health. However, I want to correct a fatal mistake that my husband has just communicated." Emily paused for a moment, letting the tension fill the entire room. Alex started to sweat coldly, his face turned pale. He tried to interrupt Emily, saying she was delusional, but Emily raised her hand, a gesture of command so strong that Alex fell silent. "I am not insane," Emily continued, her voice resonating throughout the room. "I am not sick, I am not hallucinating, and I am fully aware of what is happening in this room. What you have seen as symptoms of mental illness all this time is actually the result of a systematic attempt to poison me using illegal psychotropic drugs." The boardroom erupted in an uproar. The shareholders looked at each other in shock. Alex panicked and stood up, shouting that Emily was having an episode and was delirious. He ordered Dr. Miller to act immediately to secure the patient. Dr. Miller advanced with the syringe, but before the needle could touch Emily's skin, the boardroom doors burst open. James entered, flanked by 2 uniformed NYPD officers and Mr. Roberts, the restaurant manager. Emily stood up from her chair, staring at Alex, who was now trembling with fear. "I'm not the one who needs a doctor, Alex," Emily said, pointing at her husband's face. "You're the one who needs a lawyer. And you," Emily pointed to the shareholders, "all of you need to see who the real parasites eating away at this company are. James, please, turn on the projector." The large white screen behind Emily slowly descended. Alex tried to run towards the laptop connected to the projector to unplug the cable, but his path was blocked by the police. He was cornered, trapped in the web he himself had woven. Emily smiled faintly, a cold smile of victory. This decisive meeting certainly marked an end not to Emily's downfall, but to the end of her husband's rotten charade. The projector screen lit up brightly, ready to display the truth that would destroy Alex's life forever. The hum of the newly turned-on projector sounded very loud. In the deathly silence of the room, the bright white light hit the wide screen, stretching behind Emily, creating a silhouette of the woman who appeared upright and unmovable. Alex, his position blocked by 2 police officers, could only stand petrified with a pale face. He wanted to scream, to stop all this, but his tongue felt numb, as if a large stone were blocking his throat. Cold sweat the size of corn kernels began to appear on his forehead, soaking the collar of his expensive shirt. He knew very well what would appear on that screen. A recording of the past that he thought was safely buried along with Emily's lost memory. Emily signaled with her hand to James, who was near the laptop. James nodded firmly and pressed the play button. The first video that appeared was the security camera recording from the restaurant where they had dined. The sharp image quality allowed everyone in the room to clearly see the faces of those present. The shareholders, who were previously doubtful and confused, now leaned forward, squinting to see the details of the actual event. On the screen, the seemingly harmonious family table was visible. Emily was seen getting up from her chair and walking towards the restroom. This moment was the beginning of the entire crime. Alex's movements in the video were so clear and irrefutable. He looked left and right like an amateur thief and then quickly grabbed his wife's purse. A collective gasp of shock was heard from the meeting attendees as they saw Alex dump the contents of Emily's vitamin bottle and replace it with strange pills he took from his pants pocket. That action was so planned, so cold, and carried out by a man who had just praised his wife in front of this very forum as the most attentive husband. The image of the loving husband that Alex had built all this time was gone. What was on the screen was just a cunning con man poisoning his own partner. The video continued, showing more painful scenes. Catherine's face appeared in close-up on the screen when the camera digitally zoomed in, thanks to the forensic team hired by James. The old woman, known for being religious, was seen laughing heartily while imitating the movements of a madwoman, mocking her absent daughter-in-law. Jessica was also clearly seen giving support, patting Alex's shoulder with pride. The video was silent, without sound, but their body language screamed loudly about the evil conspiracy they were carrying out. The boardroom turned into a clamor. Murmurs of anger and disbelief began to be heard. Some board members shook their heads in disgust, looking at Alex as if he were dirt stuck on their shoes. Alex tried to defend himself amid the chaos. He shouted in a hoarse, trembling voice, trying to convince people that the video was the result of computer manipulation. He accused Emily of paying tech experts to defame him. He insisted it was a fake video, a video made with artificial intelligence to bring down his credibility as a company leader. However, Emily gave him no chance to breathe. She immediately ordered James to play the second file. This time it wasn't a video, but an audio recording. A brief sound of static was heard. Then Alex's voice appeared. Very distinctive, crisp, clear, and undeniable. It was the recording of the conversation between Alex and Jessica in the living room the night before, which Emily had recorded while hiding behind the wall. Alex's voice sounded arrogant and full of laughter, saying that Emily had already taken the poison and would soon go crazy. Alex was heard boasting about his plan to lock Emily in an asylum so he could control all the company's assets. Jessica's voice was also heard, chiming in with a fawning tone, talking about their European vacation and their official marriage after getting rid of Emily. Their cruel words echoed in every corner of the room, bouncing off the wood-paneled walls, hurting the ears of anyone who listened. That confession of sin came from their own mouths, shattering all of Alex's accusations of manipulation. No technology could imitate the intonation of hatred and greed with such precision. Jessica's face, sitting in the back row, was now as white as paper. She tried to lower her head, hiding her face with her long hair, hoping she could disappear from the room. However, the sharp gazes of the attendees were already skinning her alive. Emily then took a step forward, standing right in front of the screen that still showed Alex's face from the security video. She spoke in a calm but emphatic voice. She explained that the pills her husband introduced were dangerous psychotropic substances designed to damage the nervous system and cause permanent hallucinations if consumed continuously. Emily then showed the lab results she had just received that morning, which proved that the pills she secured from her purse contained said substance. She also showed the results of her own clean blood test, proving that she had not taken the drug and her condition was completely healthy. Before the attendees' shock could subside, James displayed the next slide. This time it was financial data, rows of numbers and graphs displayed clearly. Evidence of transfers of hundreds of thousands of dollars from the company's accounts to the personal accounts of Catherine and Jessica. Purchases of jewelry, luxury bags, new cars, and the down payment on an apartment. All using company money embezzled by Alex by forging Emily's signature. The last document shown was the photo from Jessica's passport and the photo of her secret wedding. Alex's biggest secret was revealed. The man who claimed to have married Emily for love turned out to already have another wife and was using Emily as a cash cow to fund his secret family. Alex felt his world collapse instantly. His legs gave way, unable to support his weight. He fell back into his chair with a vacant stare. All the plans he had carefully laid out for 3 years were destroyed in less than 15 minutes. He looked around for a gap to escape, but the door was strictly guarded by the police. He looked at Dr. Miller, hoping for help, but the bought-off doctor had already been detained by security while trying to slip out the side door. Alex was alone, completely alone in a sea of judgment. An older board member stood up and slammed the table hard. He pointed at Alex's face with a finger trembling with anger. He insulted Alex, calling him a traitor and a master swindler. He declared a vote of no confidence and demanded that Alex be arrested immediately and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The meeting's atmosphere turned into a public trial. Shouts of anger were directed at Alex and Jessica. Jessica began to cry hysterically, screaming that she was only following Alex's orders and knew nothing, trying to save herself by sacrificing her husband. The scene was truly pathetic and at the same time satisfying for Emily. Emily watched the chaos without expression. There was no overflowing joy, only a deep relief, because the heavy burden on her shoulders had finally been lifted. She saw Alex, who now looked small and pitiful, the man she once adored as the head of the family. Now he was nothing more than a criminal caught red-handed. Emily walked slowly, approaching the table where Alex was sitting. The police made way for her. Emily stood imposingly in front of Alex, who was still sitting limply. Alex looked up, meeting Emily's eyes. In those eyes, he hoped to still find remnants of love or compassion that he could exploit. He tried to reach for Emily's hand, begging for forgiveness in a hoarse voice. He said he was wrong, that he did all this under pressure from his mother, that he actually loved Emily. However, Emily pulled her hand away in disgust. She would not be fooled again. Alex's charade was over, and the curtain had been forcibly brought down. Emily brought her face close to Alex's ear, whispering softly so that only Alex could hear her. She said something that made Alex's eyes widen, wider than when he saw the security video. Emily said that the game wasn't really over yet. She reminded Alex of a small thing that happened in the car earlier, a trivial detail that went unnoticed by Alex because he was too busy with his own ego. Emily's whisper was like the key that opened the door to hell for Alex, one last surprise prepared by Emily as the dessert to her elegant revenge. Alex remained motionless in his chair, processing Emily's whisper that had just crept into his ear like a bone-chilling wind. Emily's words spun in his head, overlapping with the noise of the boardroom, which was becoming increasingly out of control. Emily had just spoken about the bottle of mineral water he had drunk in the car on the way to the office. The bottle of mineral water that Alex believed was sealed and safe, which he drank to the last drop because of the nerves and thirst that plagued him before his grand performance. Emily took a step back, looking at Alex with a faint smile full of meaning. She spoke again, this time loud enough to be heard by James and the nearby police, but still feeling intimate and terrifying to Alex. Emily said that as a devoted wife, she couldn't bear to see her husband tired and thirsty. Therefore, before leaving, Emily had prepared a special vitamin in Alex's water, the exact same vitamin that Alex prepared for Emily last night and this morning. The difference was, Emily gave a much more generous dose because she knew her husband needed extra energy to face this day of judgment. Alex felt his heart stop for a moment. His hands touched his own neck, as if he wanted to vomit the water that had already mixed with his blood. He remembered the water tasted a bit bitter, but he ignored it, thinking it was just the effect of toothpaste or his own nerves. It turned out that the bitter taste was the taste of his destruction. The psychotropic substance was now circulating throughout his system, waiting for the right moment to detonate his sanity. Suddenly, Alex felt the room become very hot. The air from the air conditioner, which was previously cool, now felt like it was burning his skin. He yanked at his tie roughly. His breathing became ragged. His vision started to blur. The faces of the people around him began to change shape. Emily's face, beautiful and calm, slowly elongated. Her eyes grew larger and turned bright red, as if Emily were transforming into a terrifying, monstrous figure. Alex rubbed his eyes, hoping his vision would return to normal, but the vision only became more real. The drug's effect was working much faster than expected, because Alex had drunk it on an empty stomach with a high level of stress. Visual hallucinations began to attack him one after another. He saw the shareholders no longer as humans, but as monsters, with fangs ready to tear him apart. The long meeting table seemed to move like a giant snake, coiling around his body. The floor beneath his feet felt like it was shaking violently, as if in a massive earthquake. Although the room was still, Alex began to scream hysterically. He jumped from his chair, crashing into the police officer guarding him. He screamed for help, saying there were demons who wanted to eat him. He pointed at Emily with a trembling finger, shrieking that Emily was a witch, summoning evil spirits. The attendees who saw Alex's behavior backed away in fear. They didn't see what Alex saw. What they witnessed was just a grown man suddenly losing his mind, shouting at nothing, and scared of his own shadow. Alex fell to the floor, crawling and covering his head with both hands. He babbled nonsensically, mixing confessions of his sins with absurd fears. He screamed for his mother, begging her to shoo away the black cats he saw circling his legs. He yelled about money, about the safe, about his plan to poison Emily. Everything came pouring out uncontrollably from his foaming mouth. The hallucination forced him to vomit up all the truth he had hidden as well. What an irony. The script of madness he had prepared for Emily was now happening to him, in the exact place and time he had planned. Jessica, seeing Alex lose his mind, panicked even more. She tried to run towards the emergency exit, but her steps were halted as she tripped over her own trembling feet. She fell flat on her face, and it was then that the police immediately handcuffed her. Jessica cried loudly, watching her adopted brother and secret husband rolling on the floor like a man possessed. That scene became the strongest proof for everyone in the room that it was Alex who was truly unstable, not Emily. Dr. Miller, also secured by the police, could only shake his head seeing Alex's state. As a doctor, he knew exactly what the symptoms were. It was an acute overdose reaction to the hallucinogenic drug that he had illegally prescribed for Alex. He knew there was no instant antidote for this condition. Alex would have to go through that horrific journey until the drug's effect wore off naturally, which could take hours or even days. The doctor lowered his head in shame, realizing his career was over. Emily remained still amidst the chaos, like a stone pillar in a storm. She looked at Alex with an expression that was hard to interpret. There was pity, but that feeling was covered by the thickness of the pain Alex had caused. She saw her husband crawl towards her feet, not to ask for forgiveness, but because he thought Emily's legs were a pillar to shelter behind from the monsters in his head. Alex hugged Emily's legs while crying like a baby. Snot and tears soaked Emily's dress. Emily didn't move. She let Alex feel how low his position was. Now James signaled to the police to immediately secure Alex before he could harm himself or others. 3 officers advanced and with difficulty tried to restrain Alex, who was struggling wildly. Alex kicked and punched blindly, screaming that they were an army of demons sent to drag him to hell. It took extra force to finally get the handcuffs on both his hands and force him to stand up. Alex continued to struggle. His eyes looked wildly at the ceiling. His mouth kept murmuring unknown names. Emily finally took a step back, freeing herself from Alex's reach. She straightened her clothes, which were slightly wrinkled from Alex's grip. She looked at the shareholders who were still petrified in shock. In a calm and authoritative voice, Emily apologized for the inconvenience and the drama that occurred today. She said the meeting would be postponed until the situation was conducive and guaranteed that the company would be immediately cleansed of all criminal elements that had harmed it. As Alex was dragged out of the room by the police, he turned back to look at Emily one last time. In Alex's hallucinated vision, Emily seemed to be shining very brightly, dazzling his eyes, as if Emily were the angel of death who had just signed his sentence. Alex let out a long scream, a cry of despair that echoed down the building's hallway, marking the end of the career, ambition, and sanity of a man who was too greedy in chasing the world and forgot about karma. Emily sighed deeply after the boardroom door closed, taking away Alex's screams. Silence once again enveloped the room. James gently patted Emily's shoulder, giving her moral support. Emily smiled faintly at the young lawyer. Then she looked at Mr. Roberts, who was in a corner. The middle-aged man nodded with respect and a proud smile, as if seeing his student pass the toughest exam of her life. Emily knew her physical battle was over, but the struggle to reclaim her heart and the good name of the company had just begun. But at least the real poison, those toxic humans, had been expelled from her life forever. The chaos in the boardroom slowly subsided after Alex and Jessica were forcibly removed by the police. The echo of Alex's hysterical screams still seemed to hang in the air, leaving a trail of deep unease for anyone who had heard it. Emily remained standing in her place, staring at the double doors that had just closed. Her shoulders, which had been tense, began to relax slowly. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of freedom mixed with the remnants of tension. Around her, the shareholders and the board of directors were still frozen in silence, trying to digest the criminal drama that had just unfolded before them. No one dared to speak until Emily turned around and looked at them one by one with a calm yet authoritative gaze. James, the efficient young lawyer, took control of the technical situation. He asked security personnel to open the windows and turn on the room lights fully to change the gloomy atmosphere. With agility, James distributed copies of the original documents proving that Emily was the sole legitimate owner and possessed full sanity. Emily then spoke to those present, apologizing once more for the disruption and assuring them that the company's operations would continue as normal starting tomorrow morning. She emphasized that a full audit would be conducted immediately to trace every cent that had been embezzled by her husband. Emily's professional and strong demeanor instantly restored the investors' confidence. Those who had doubted Emily now looked at her with new respect. One by one, they greeted Emily, offering their support and condemning Alex's vile acts. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a false peace still enveloped the luxurious house where Catherine awaited news. The woman was sitting relaxed on the living room sofa, enjoying hot, sweet tea and cookies. Her feet were propped up on the coffee table, a dirty habit she never dared to do when Emily was home. Her face was radiant, imagining that at this moment her son was gallantly leading the meeting after having sent the daughter-in-law she considered foolish to an asylum. In her mind, Catherine had already made a new shopping list. She wanted to buy a set of diamond jewelry she saw yesterday and perhaps renovate her room to be more luxurious. Catherine glanced at the wall clock. The meeting should be over by now. She reached for her cell phone, intending to call Alex or Jessica to hear the news of their victory. But before her fingers could press the call button, a loud banging was heard from the front door. It wasn't the polite knock of a guest, but rough thuds and firm shouts ordering the occupants of the house to come out. Catherine's heart leaped, the teacup in her hand slipped and shattered on the floor, spilling the sticky brown liquid onto the expensive carpet. A bad feeling instantly assailed her, but her ego refused to believe it. She thought perhaps it was debt collectors for Alex's cards who had the wrong address. With trembling steps and an angry face, Catherine walked to the door. She intended to scold whoever dared to disturb her comfort. However, when she opened the door, the insults got stuck in her throat. In front of her stood 3 uniformed police officers and 2 plainclothes detectives. Behind them, a patrol car with its blue lights flashing was visible, attracting the attention of neighbors who were beginning to come out of their houses to watch. Catherine took a step back, her face as pale as a corpse, stammering as she asked what they wanted in the house of respectable people. One of the officers showed the arrest and search warrant. The officer firmly explained that Catherine was being arrested for suspected involvement in a case of attempted premeditated murder, fraud, embezzlement, and criminal conspiracy, along with Alex and Jessica. Catherine shrieked hysterically. She flatly denied the accusations. She shouted that she was a devout mother and couldn't do such a thing. She began to cry loudly, trying to manipulate the officer's compassion, but the police were unmoved. They entered the house and began to search every room. In Catherine's room, the police found undeniable evidence. Hidden in her closet drawer were several luxury jewelry boxes whose purchase receipts were in Emily's company's name. They also found several bottles of herbal medicine that turned out to be mixed with sedative powder, remnants of the concoction she used to give Emily. Most incriminatingly, in the kitchen trash, the police found a container of rat poison and leftover cat food, identical to what was found in the stomach of the dead cat on the back patio. Apparently, the part-time housekeeper who came that afternoon saw the dead cat and reported it to the neighborhood security guard, who became an additional witness for the police. Catherine was dragged out of the house in handcuffs. She struggled, insulting Emily, calling her an ungrateful daughter. The neighbors, to whom she always boasted about her fake wealth, now looked at her with disgust and mockery. The shame Catherine felt was far more painful than the metal cuffs that squeezed her wrists. She was put into the police car like a common criminal. Her dreams of a luxurious life were shattered in an instant, replaced by the image of cold, gloomy bars. At the police station, Emily arrived accompanied by James to give an additional statement. Emily saw Jessica being interrogated in a room with a one-way mirror. The young woman who used to be fashionable and arrogant now looked disastrous. Her makeup was streaked with tears, her hair was matted, and her eyes were swollen. Seeing Emily walk past in the hallway, Jessica stood up and banged on the glass, screaming for help. She begged Emily to drop the charges. Jessica argued that she was only following Alex's orders, that she was threatened, and that she actually wanted to warn Emily, but was afraid. Emily just glanced at her fleetingly without expression and continued on her way. She knew they were crocodile tears. Jessica was the mastermind behind the vacation idea and the embezzlement, just as evil as Alex. James then delivered the news that made the suspects despair even more. All of Alex's assets, including the car he was paying off, personal bank accounts, and fraudulent investments, had been officially frozen by the authorities. James had also filed a civil lawsuit to seize the personal assets of Catherine and Jessica to cover the company's losses, which reached millions of dollars. This meant they would not only rot in jail, but would also fall into absolute poverty. There would be no money for expensive lawyers or for a comfortable life inside a cell. That night, Emily returned to her large house. The house was now empty and quiet. There were no fake laughs from Catherine, no whining complaints from Jessica, and no manipulative greetings from Alex. Emily sat on the living room sofa, the place where she was often lied to. She looked around the room that now felt very spacious. At first, loneliness crept in, but gradually that feeling changed to an extraordinary tranquility. She felt as if she had just been cured of a deadly chronic illness. Emily closed her eyes, letting a tear fall, not of sadness for losing her husband, but as a way to release emotions for the suffering she had endured. That night, for the first time in 3 years, Emily was able to sleep soundly without fear, without whispers in the walls, and without sleeping pills. She slept in the embrace of the truth she had won. A month had passed since the great storm hit Emily's life. Time, though it walked slowly, was beginning to heal the invisible wounds. The city returned to its routine, and the names of Alex and his family became top news in the local papers as the most shameful family fraud scandal of the year. However, like any sensational news, public attention slowly shifted, leaving the guilty to reap the storm they sowed in silence and suffering, far from the cameras. That morning, Emily was sitting in her office chair. The morning sunlight streamed through the large window behind her, creating a halo of light that made her seem to glow. She wore an elegant navy blue business suit. Her face looked fresh and much healthier than a month ago. There were no dark circles under her eyes, and her cheeks had a natural blush. Emily was reading the final report delivered by James. The report contained the summary of the court's verdict and the status of the convicts' asset seizures. A faint smile appeared on her lips as she read the fate of those who tried to destroy her. Alex was sentenced to 12 years in prison on multiple charges: attempted premeditated murder, document forgery, embezzlement, and narcotics abuse. Due to his severely damaged mental state from the overdose during his arrest, Alex had to serve the beginning of his sentence in the maximum security psychiatric prison unit. The report mentioned that Alex often screamed alone at night, calling for Emily and his mother alternately, living in permanent fear of the monsters he himself had created. The man who so adored his appearance was now skin and bones, with a shaved head and a lost gaze. He had lost everything: looks, sanity, and freedom. Jessica received an 8-year sentence. Her guilt was proven in identity, passport, and marital status forgery, as well as complicity in Alex's crimes. In the women's prison, Jessica, accustomed to an easy life, became a target for other inmates. The latest news said she had to work in the prison laundry, washing other prisoners' clothes with her delicate hands that once only touched designer bags. She often cried, asking for face cream, ridiculous requests that no one entertained. Catherine's fate was no less tragic. Although she was not imprisoned as long as Alex due to her age, she received 5 years. But the social and economic punishment was far more painful. Her luxury home was foreclosed on and auctioned off. All her jewelry and luxury goods were confiscated. Now Catherine truly had nothing. James said that even distant relatives didn't want to visit or help her out of shame. The old woman, obsessed with status, now spent her old age behind bars, alone, branded as a mother who failed to raise her son and a wicked mother-in-law. Emily closed the file and put it in the drawer. She didn't feel an explosive satisfaction, but a quiet gratitude. Justice had been served perfectly. Emily stood up from her chair, took her purse, the same purse she forgot that night, but now she held it with a firm grip. She had an important lunch appointment today, not with clients, but with someone who saved her life. Emily's car drove through the streets of Manhattan towards the restaurant where it all began. The restaurant seemed busier than usual. Since Emily's case came out, the restaurant's reputation had soared, as it was considered to have an advanced security system and an integer management that protected its customers. Emily entered with a strange sense of nostalgia. She no longer felt fear or trauma. This place was a witness to betrayal, but also to her rebirth. Mr. Roberts was already waiting at the same table, number 12, but this time it was set for only 2. Mr. Roberts greeted Emily with a warm and sincere smile, not the formal smile of a manager, but that of a friend. Emily returned the smile and greeted Mr. Roberts with gratitude. They sat across from each other. On the table were already special dishes cooked by the chef under Mr. Roberts's instruction. Emily opened the conversation by stating her intention. She took a thick envelope from her purse. Inside was not money, but a deed. Emily explained that she had just bought a majority stake in the restaurant from the old owner who was retiring, and as the new owner, Emily's first decision was to appoint Mr. Roberts as the chief operating officer with a significant shareholding. Emily wanted Mr. Roberts to run the restaurant completely because she knew it was in the hands of the most honest and dedicated person. Mr. Roberts was stunned, his eyes welling with tears. He didn't expect his kindness in saving a customer would bear such fruit. He gently refused at first, feeling it was too much, but Emily insisted. She said that Mr. Roberts not only saved her life from poison but also saved her future from the poison of life. Without Mr. Roberts seeing the cameras and daring to act, Emily might now be in an asylum, truly insane from the drugs. Finally, Mr. Roberts accepted the offer with emotion. They toasted with glasses of natural orange juice, a healthy and pure drink, without poison, without deceit. Emily raised her glass, looked at Mr. Roberts, and said softly, "To a new life, and to the good people God sends just in time." Mr. Roberts nodded firmly. "To Mrs. Emily, the strongest woman I have ever met." The lunch proceeded amidst laughter. Emily felt the burden completely disappear. Looking at the security camera in the corner that recorded Alex's crime, Emily smiled faintly. She promised herself that from today on, she would be more careful, but she would not close her heart completely. She would move forward, running her company, enjoying her life, and being a completely free woman. After finishing lunch, Emily left the restaurant and walked to her car. The afternoon wind blew gently on her face. She looked up at the clear blue sky. The images of Alex, Catherine, and Jessica slowly faded from her memory, turning into dust from the past that no longer hurt. Emily got into the car, started the engine, and drove away from the restaurant. In the rearview mirror, she saw Mr. Roberts waving goodbye. Emily smiled, put on her favorite music, and drove towards a bright future alone, but not lonely, because now she had herself back completely, and that was more than enough.